Welcome to this explainer for General English 9. Today, we are focusing on building a true communicator's toolkit. We're going to scale all the way from the cellular level of language, individual words and their parts, right up to the macro level. We'll explore how to take those words, build them into perfectly punctuated sentences, and ultimately deploy them in a live parliamentary debate. If you want to articulate your ideas powerfully and persuasively, you are absolutely in the right place. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by unlocking words with affixes, move into punctuating clauses correctly, and then cover participating in a debate. Finally, we'll clear up some common misconceptions, do a quick formative check, and summarize our key concepts. To set our academic foundation, our 3 core learning objectives are declarative and crystal clear. First, we will use affixes to determine word meaning. Second, we will use and punctuate various types of clauses correctly. And third, we will participate in a debate. By mastering these 3 steps, you transform from just being a passive reader into a highly active, persuasive communicator. Section 1. Unlocking words with affixes. This is the micro level of language. Before we can build massive arguments, we have to understand our foundational building blocks. That brings us to morphology, which is just the study of word parts. The fundamental unit here is the morpheme. A morpheme is a word or a part of a word that has a meaning and contains absolutely no smaller part that has a meaning. It's the base unit. Now, morphemes come in 2 different varieties. Some are free morphemes, meaning they can stand completely alone as a standalone word. Think of words like cat or walk. But others are bound morphemes. They cannot stand alone and actually have to be attached to another morpheme to make sense. Things like the prefix re or the suffix ed. It is genuinely fascinating how we can break down a larger word into these tiny units of meaning. Take the word transportable. It's essentially a puzzle made of 3 bound morphemes. We have the prefix trans, which means across. We have the root port, which means carry. And we have the suffix able, which means capable of. Now, none of these 3 parts can stand alone as a fully independent English word in this specific context, but combined, they create a specific, complex word meaning capable of being carried across. When you learn to spot these inside clues, you literally unlock the meaning of countless unfamiliar words in everything you read. Section 2. Punctuating clauses correctly. This brings us up to the meso level of language. Now that we understand the micro level of words, we're scaling up to combine words into structured thoughts. To build a solid sentence, you absolutely must understand the difference between the 2 main types of clauses. First, we have the independent clause. It has a subject and a verb, and most importantly, it can stand completely alone as a complete sentence. Then we have the dependent clause. It also has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone. It relies entirely on the independent clause to make a complete thought. We actually categorize the 4 main types of sentences based on how we mix and match those exact clauses. A simple sentence is just 1 independent clause. A compound sentence joins 2 or more independent clauses together. A complex sentence brings in at least 1 dependent clause with an independent one. And a compound complex sentence is exactly what it sounds like. It's the whole shebang. 2 or more independent clauses plus at least 1 dependent clause. So let's look at exactly how we punctuate these combinations in practice. Consider this compound sentence. Road construction can be inconvenient, but it is necessary. We have 2 completely independent thoughts here. First, road construction can be inconvenient, and second, it is necessary. To join these 2 complete thoughts properly, we use a comma, followed immediately by a coordinating conjunction. In this case, we use the word but. But what if you want to join 2 independent clauses without using a coordinating conjunction at all? Well, that is where the semicolon really shines. Listen to this example. Road construction has hindered travel, streets are covered with cones. The semicolon connects these 2 highly related thoughts of equal emphasis cleanly and directly. No conjunction needed. Now let's step it up to a complex sentence. Notice the dependent clause right at the very beginning here. Because road construction has hindered travel. It kind of leaves you hanging, right? It just can't stand alone. When you introduce a sentence with a dependent clause like this, you must place a comma right after it, right before you deliver the main independent clause, which here is, many people walk to work. Finally, let's look at the compound complex sentence. We start with an introductory dependent clause, when it is filtered. As we literally just learned, that gets a comma. Then we have our first independent clause, water is cleaner. And because we want to add a second independent clause to this, we use another comma and our coordinating conjunction to say, and it tastes better. Mastering this specific punctuation toolkit is a total game changer. It means your writing will instantly become clear and way more sophisticated. Section 3. Participating in a debate. Welcome to the macro level of language. We are now taking those precise words and perfectly punctuated clauses and stepping right into the live arena. We are going to look specifically at the 6-person parliamentary debate format. In this format, 2 teams face off over a specific motion. For instance, the motion might be, this house would remove junk food from schools. The proposition team always opens the debate. Their entire job is to support the motion and prove it is more probably true than false. The opposition team does exactly what their name implies. They oppose. They provide what debaters call clash. That means directly undermining the logic of the proposition team's case and arguing firmly against their support. So how does this actually play out? Every debater in the 6-person format gives exactly 1 speech. The first 4 are called constructive speeches, and each one lasts for 5 minutes. This is where teams build their core arguments and offer their refutations. After those constructives, the debate shifts into the rebuttal phase. Each side gets a shorter 3-minute rebuttal speech to summarize the major arguments and explain exactly why their team won the debate. Notice a key detail here. The proposition team gets to both open and close the debate. But parliamentary debate isn't just taking turns giving isolated speeches in a vacuum. It's highly interactive. A really unique feature is the point of information, or POI. If your opponent is speaking during their constructive speech, you can actually rise and say point of information. You're essentially asking them to yield the floor to you so you can make a strategic 15-second statement or question. Now, the speaker can either accept or reject your point. However, you have to remember the rule of protected time. The very first and last minute of every constructive speech is protected. Absolutely no points of information are allowed during that time. This ensures the speaker can introduce and conclude their thoughts without any interruption. Section 4. Misconceptions and formative check. Let's test our toolkit and make sure we avoid some common traps. A really common misconception goes back to our very first topic, morphology. It's a huge myth that prefixes always have a consistent, literal meaning that never, ever changes. The reality is, a prefix like in can mean not in one word, but it can actually mean in another word. Furthermore, the meanings of a lot of Greek and Latin roots have shifted over hundreds of years. That means literal translations just don't always work perfectly today. Morphemes are vital clues, for sure, but always check your assumed meaning against the context of the actual sentence. Now, here is a massive myth regarding debate. The idea that you should somehow save a brand new surprise argument to ambush your opponent in your final 3-minute rebuttal speech. So the crucial point here is you absolutely cannot do this. Rebuttals are exclusively summary speeches. You must only carry through and impact arguments that were already founded during the earlier constructive speeches. Introducing brand new arguments in a rebuttal is strictly against the rules of parliamentary debate. Okay, let's do a quick formative check on those punctuation rules we talked about. Imagine you are furiously writing out notes for your opening proposition speech. If you start your sentence with an introductory dependent clause, what punctuation mark must immediately follow it before you begin your independent clause? Think back to our complex sentence rules for a second. You need a comma. Joining an introductory dependent clause to an independent clause always requires a comma to separate them. Section 5. Summary of key concepts. Let's pull this whole thing together. We started right at the foundation today, learning how to decode unfamiliar vocabulary by breaking words down into their morphemes, the prefixes, roots, and suffixes. Then we took those words and learned how to build and accurately punctuate simple, compound, complex, and compound complex sentences. We paid special attention to exactly how independent and dependent clauses interact. And finally, we learned how to structure all of those complex thoughts into highly persuasive arguments, respecting the strict timelines, roles, and rules of the parliamentary debate format. From the absolute smallest prefix all the way to the grandest rebuttal speech, communication really is just a matter of scale. Words are your building blocks. The logic, the punctuation, and the format give those words their power. So the only question left for you is, how will you arrange them to win your next debate? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.